Whether you're a young student or a senior diplomat, if you're from Israel, you've most likely had to defend the image of the small country. The Jewish state is in a constant battle to improve its negative reputation worldwide, but movements like BDS continue to try to cut the country down. Bar-Yoshafat is one Israeli who decided to take action and go on a journey to inform the world about the real Israel, and he's here in the studio with us today to tell us all about it. Thanks so much for coming in.
Thank you for having me.
So to begin, what drives a young man like yourself to just leave everything behind and go and talk to strangers about Israel?
Well, I served during the Second Intifada as a hand-to-hand combat expert. I still serve every year between 1 to 2 months in the Israeli Army Reserves. And in my mind, I was doing the most positive thing ever. I was protecting Jews, Christians, Muslims, innocent civilians against terror. The first time I came to the States, I've noticed that most people find me as the aggressor, as the negative character here. And I said, this has to be stopped. So just like I serve every year between 1 to 2 months in the Army Reserves, I feel like I kind of serve my country and I go and I try to improve Israel's image.
Interesting. Now, what did you discover during this journey? What was your most memorable experience going out abroad and talking about Israel?
So what really surprised me is that there's such a big difference in the discourse between here in Israel and outside of Israel. Here in Israel, we have political disputes. People can be more right-wing, left-wing. They want to build more settlements or less. Outside of Israel, mainly in college campuses, people don't want Israel to exist at all. They're talking about accusations that most Israelis have never heard of. The first accusation that I've heard when I went to a college campus in Seattle was Israel is systematically raping babies to scare the Arab population. And I thought, that's crazy. No Israelis would ever think that because we know the reality here. So that was the most shocking thing for me, that the difference in the discourse. One of my most memorable experiences was that I was actually able to make a difference. Because if you ask me, I would argue that most people in the world don't wake up in the morning and say, I wonder how Israel is doing. Most people want to, have a decent job, maybe settle down, get married, have kids. They're not focused on Israel. However, there is like the 5 to 15% who are very vocal against Israel. There's 5 to 15% who are very pro-Israel, and there's 70% in the middle. And that's where I want to reach. That's my targeted audience. And I've discovered that I can actually get these people to be with me, to be on board, because I'm telling the truth.
It's interesting. Where do you think this information is coming from? An accusation like that Israel is raping children. Where is that information coming from?
Unfortunately, that came from an Israeli, which is kind of funny because there's also a research that was conducted that why aren't we raping? Because in every situation of conflict, usually the more stronger side is committing rape.
Right,
so
the Israeli-Palestinian conflict has been known for decades not having that issue.
So the conclusion was that one, we are too racist, and two, is that we don't want to increase the Arab birth rate. So I asked my teammate from the army, how come you guys don't rape? They said, look, demographics. I mean, at least you have to be honest. You cannot argue both arguments at the same time. You cannot be not raping because you're a rapist and raping systematically. That just doesn't go along. The accusations both came from Israelis, unfortunately.
Wow. All right. So, this book I see in front of you, why don't you tell us about what it contains and what drove you to write it?
So, one of the most difficult part of my experience was that I was alone. I went to different college campus and people cursed me. They shouted very negative things at me, and I was by myself. So I kind of had to vent. So how did I vent? I sent emails back to my friends, my family. I was like, this is what happened to me here. These accusations I've just heard for the first time. I couldn't believe it. So then when I came back to Israel, I said, I want Israelis to know what is happening there on the college campuses, sometimes in the churches. So I just took all of my letters and I kind of edited them down to a book. I'm not objective, but I think it's very fun to read. And it shows what is the situation outside of Israel, and also how can you act, how can you be active in order to improve Israel's image.
Is this book also available in English for those who want to
No,
read it in the United States?
Actually, this book is aimed for Israelis. I'm working on my third book, which will be for North Americans, but this is my first book. It's aimed for Israelis who are not aware of what is happening in a college campus. I would argue that most students in college campuses notice when there's Israel Apartheid Week. So this is for Israelis only, but a lot of new Olim like to read this book because it's very simple. I maintain a very simple language. It's like letters. It's very personal. It's my experiences, my difficulties, my achievements. So a lot of Neolim ask me to give them the book so they can practice their Hebrew.
Now here's my question for you. When you were going on this trip, how did you choose which campuses to go to? What was that process like?
Well, the organization that flew me for this shlichut was Stand With Us. So
Okay.
they chose the college campuses for me. After that, different organization invited me for different occasions, but Stand With Us were in charge of setting the different schedule in different college campuses. And how did they choose it? According to wherever they thought it was more needed. For instance, I would argue that the vast majority of the American people are pro-Israel. They support Israel, but there are certain areas where it's different. For instance, the Pacific Northwest, the UCs, all of the UCs, they're more critical of Israel. So that's where I spent most of my time, in these areas.
Not a bad place to spend your time. Now, some people are calling this public diplomacy. Do you find the efforts that you have been doing in these colleges to be helpful, to actually have an impact on the people that you're speaking with?
Great question. So they've conducted a survey and they've noticed that every place that I went to, the support for Israel has grown by about 20%. I do believe that you can improve Israel's image. The only thing is that you need to put more efforts into it. And also I'm very happy that you call it public diplomacy, not hasbara, which is a word that doesn't exist in English, and I think that's one of the problems that we have. Because once I begin with hasbara, I'm being very apologetic, like I need to explain what I've done wrong. And this is public diplomacy, just like any other country is trying to create a positive image. Same for Israel, we're trying to present who we are, what we are, especially when we're being bashed from the other side.
What would you say is the biggest challenge that Israel is facing when it comes to its international image?
So first, let me say this. With all due respect to the international image, I will always be preferred to be hated because I'm strong than to be liked when I'm weak. So if you ask me what is my biggest challenge, we have more serious challenges than college students bashing Israel. But we need to change our terminology and we need to take the discourse to where we want to have it. For instance, you use the acronym the BDS movement. They're not the BDS movement, they're the movement to destroy Israel. That's their main objective. They know that they're not really going to hurt us economically, but they're trying to label Israel as the worst evil today. So that will, in the future, will make it more easy for other countries to attack Israel, and it will make Israel more difficult to react.
Is there anything that Israel could do, though, to try to improve that image, if at all?
Yes, and I think that Israel is doing it. I mean, it's very easy to criticize the government, and there's always place for criticism. It's healthy for a citizen to criticize the government, but the government is doing a lot of stuff. I would argue that the next challenge will be how to combine the government work and the civil society, because it wouldn't work without, one cannot work without the other. The civil society needs the information from the government. Sometimes it might need budgets from the government, and the government will need the civil society to work, different organizations such as Stand With Us, and also many others, to go and to do the groundwork that the government cannot do.
Now, this is kind of getting more into the specifics, but what are the most challenging topics that students in American college face when it comes to speaking about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict? So let's say you're at a dinner party and you come across somebody that speaks negatively about Israel. What do you teach these students to respond?
So I'll give you an example. A very common accusation is that Israel is an apartheid state. Okay, someone will tell me, look, an Arab from Ramallah and a Jew from Tel Aviv, they don't have the same rights. That is correct. The only thing is that the Arab from Ramallah doesn't have the same right as me because he's not an Israeli citizen, nor does he want to be, otherwise I wouldn't have a conflict. An Arab in Tel Aviv and a Jew in Tel Aviv have the full equal rights. If you're an Israeli citizen, you have full equal rights. It doesn't matter your religion, your ethnicity, nothing. I got my law degree from Salim Jubran, the Arab judge that sent my Jewish president to jail. If someone wants the Arab from Ramallah to have the same rights as a Jew from Tel Aviv, they're actually saying, you need to annex Judea and Samaria. So I'm not sure they understand what they're saying. Another common accusation is that Israel is committing an ethnic cleansing of the Palestinian, which is kind of interesting because in Gaza, Israel proper, and Judea and Samaria, their number has grown by about 10 times. So we're probably doing a very, very bad job. So these are some of the accusations that usually we hear. You have about 25 to 30 questions that repeat themselves. So I would say you need to divide it into two parts.
What about when it comes to, the disparity between Arab Israelis living within Israel and Jewish Israelis living here. You know, how do you kind of combat those issues?
Well, I give them some basic information. Again, Supreme Court's judge. The third biggest party in the Israeli parliament is the Arab Party. Muslim officers serving as high-rank officers in the Israeli Defense Forces. The ratio of Arab students in universities in Israel. To say that within Israel proper, Arabs are being treated differently, I would argue it's far from reality.
All right, well, finally, where can we get your book if we'd like to get a copy?
Well, this book you can find in Stimatsky in Summit Sfarim, and also you can order it online from flytotalk.co.il.
Great. Well, thank you so much for coming in. I will look forward to reading your book myself.
Thank you for having me.